All righty. Well, welcome to Romera Records virtual cast. Today we have on Scott. How's it going, man?
Going pretty good, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show. Good to be here.
No doubt. So yeah, got you from Pod Match, and basically just wanted to give you a chance to talk about what you do. So if you could just go ahead and jump into, I guess, who you are, what you do, and how you got started.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I'm Scott Allan. I am a writer and author, entrepreneur, and a creative. And so I write a lot of books, and I've written a lot of books over the past decade or so, probably with 35 to 40 books, mostly focused on self-help and personal development. And how I got into that is probably a bigger story, but just to give you a little bit of context before I dive into that. So I've been living in Japan for about 25 or 26 years. And I got here because one day I just decided that I had to change things up with my life. Things weren't going the way I wanted them to. And I decided to take charge of the situation. So I sat down, mapped out a plan for things that I wanted to do, and made a list of goals, started taking action towards those goals. And several of those things on the list were number one, I wanted to become an author. That was always a lifetime dream. Second thing is travel the world, which was not a lifetime dream. It just happened to come up at a when I started brainstorming a lot of my goals. That was the one thing that came up. And the third thing is I just wanted to get better as a human being. I think I wanted to make a lot of improvements in my life, kind of move away from a lot of the cravings and the habits and things that were, leading me not towards the goals that I really wanted. So anyway, I put together a plan. A year later, found myself on a plane. I found the job before I came here. A company brought me over, and they set me up with a great place to live, a car, good salary, and that was it. I was in. So uh, anyway, yeah. So I live in Japan. It's great. I had a great life here, and I continue to do so. But I think I started writing again about 10 or 15 years ago. And the reason I started with, we'll call it self-help material, basically, books that make people feel better and act better. Um, those were the kinds of books that really helped me a lot, like when I was going through a period in my life where I just needed to make some serious changes. Uh, I started going through a lot of these books, and every time I went through, I learned a new strategy or a new technique, and I applied it. I got a results, and a lot of those results were really good, so I just kept moving forward with that. And so when I started putting my own material together, I wanted to create programs that would be able to help people who, were stuck in life, looking for their purpose. They didn't have any direction, or they just wanted to become high performance superstars, more or less. I mean, not everybody has to go to that level, but most of my material is really teaches people just how to, reinvent themselves, create a new identity, do the one thing that they've always wanted to do with their life, what's holding them back, right? So in a nutshell, that's more or less what I do. I do, I have a lot of frameworks for the material I put together. And back when I was in like in the corporate world, I would go into a lot of boardrooms, and I'd be the one to go in and walk through the frameworks of how to help a company's like Salesforce to overcome the fear of rejection, or help people to create a better frame of mind or mindset. And those are the things that I think really fires me up, like teaching people these things, and especially seeing when they take action on it and they're implementing the strategies, to make a better life, not just for themselves, but for their families, their friends, the people that they work with. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey so far, and I feel like it's just begun. So
So you said you've been living in Japan for 25 years, right?
that's correct. Yes.
So when you were like before that, that's when you said you were in corporate, or you had also doing corporate jobs in Japan?
Oh, great question. Yeah, let me clarify that. So before I came to Japan, I'll dive a little deeper into that story actually, because I think I left a big part of that out. I was working as an electrical engineer, so that is my background. But it wasn't really something that I wanted to pursue. So I was living in Vancouver at the time, and again, I was going through a transitional period where I didn't want to continue doing this because I looked at a lot of the guys who are in that trade, and a lot of them were like burned out, broke, um, working in dirty jobs. And I was like, this isn't really what I want to do. And I made that decision. And when I did, I started working on, a plan to do something different. Now, I didn't just decide I'm going to move to Japan and that was it. I made a decision to I wanted to create a life for myself that something that nobody had ever done before. Like that was just what I had in mind, and I wanted to experience something that I'd never experienced before and do the things that I heard other people talking about, like traveling to exotic countries and doing this and that. And, I'd never really been anywhere before, I think. Didn't really travel that much. I was just spending a lot of time in bars, etc. So, that lifestyle grew very old, and it was making me old. So anyway, bottom line is I got to work. I wrote down my goals. I put those goals up on my wall. I created a vision board, basically of everything I wanted to do. And this was even pre-internet. So like I would go to the library, get books, we still have libraries and books there. But I would get library, like I would get books out of the library on how to speak Vietnamese and Thai. And, I would start researching these places because I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was doing actually was creating the future for myself before it was there. I was visualizing the life that I wanted to have. And every time I would look at a picture or a place that I wanted to go, I would just solidify that in my mind, thinking like I'm going there. Like there was no doubt in my mind that I was going to do these things. I remember my roommates would come home after they were out all night, and I'd be on the living room floor, practicing Thai or Vietnamese or something like that. And they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm getting ready for my trip." So, um, but that was like I just became so obsessed with that that's really what created this reality, which would come later on. But yeah, I decided to basically switch. Not just it wasn't just about changing my job or changing my career or anything like that. It was really just creating a life for myself that I didn't really think was possible. I mean, in the beginning, right? But I knew that I could make it possible, if I applied myself, if I just made it real in my mind. And that's what I did is I convinced my subconscious mind that this is the reality that we are now living in. And anyway, one day my roommate brought home a newspaper, and I don't read the newspaper, never have. The only time I've ever looked at it was probably to look at the comics or to see what was playing at the movies. But I just happened to pick up this newspaper on this one particular day, open it up, and right there in the center of the page was this advertisement that said, teach English in Japan, apply now. I thought, great, that sounds like a good idea. So that's what I did. I sent them in a resume, typed up a nice little cover letter, and but a month later they contacted me, and I found myself in a fancy hotel in downtown Vancouver having an interview with a Japanese businessman who had flown over from Japan to interview a bunch of people for these positions they were hiring for. And they were hiring three people, and they had hundreds of applications, and had the interview. I think the next week they called me up and said, well, your interview was really good, but, really sorry, but you were like number four, so I didn't quite make the cut. But the next day they called me up and said, the third guy dropped out, so you're in. So, you can think of that as probably destiny, but I think a lot of it just came because I was so determined to do this thing. I was willing to do whatever it takes. Anyway, 6 months later, I found myself on a plane. They flew us over there. I started teaching. And by the way, and I don't have a background in education or a business degree or anything like that, but you didn't have to. They flew us over there. They gave us training and everything. And next thing you know, I found myself in like, going to these companies like Toyota and Panasonic and all these other major corporations, walking in doing presentations on how to conduct yourself when you go overseas and doing business and things like that. And these were things again that I wasn't trained for, but I realized is like you can train yourself to do absolutely anything if you learn the skill. So anyway, thing is that I was doing something that was very different, very exciting. And I like doubled my salary when I went there. Like the pay was good, but also I was working half as less, and I wasn't getting fried from almost hooking up transformer to the wrong polarity. Like that almost happened a few times. So yeah, and anyway, the story. The point is though is that I was living the dream, and then I started traveling, and Japan was always my home base, but I was able to make the money there, and then eventually go traveling to all these other countries, that I always dreamt of, So, um, yeah, just, that just knowing that, like, that's very empowering, knowing that you are in control of your own destiny, if you believe that, and that you can make anything happen for yourself if you really wanted to. And for me, it's just always having that, my attitude is like, I'll do whatever it takes to get there. Right. And, I still apply that to everything I work on today. So,
So something that I'm a big proponent of is the definition of luck that a lot of people say, which is opportunity when that meets your preparation. And I think that basically what happened to you is you had prepared for that moment, and
mm-hmm.
the opportunity arose, and it just seems like luck that you lucked into that third spot. But as I said, firmly believe in that statement of luck and preparation. Just
Mm-hmm.
I mean, preparation and opportunity create that luck for you. Do you feel like it was something that you just needed to do? Like it was obviously you could have done something else, right? Like you could have just
Mm-hmm.
not done that, but did you feel like that was just a major turning point in your lifetime?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the topic of luck. I'm glad you mentioned that because when I made the decision to do, like to move to Japan, or even before that, actually, like I just made a decision that I was going to move to Thailand. That was really my plan. But thing is, once I made that decision, like nothing changed that. Like, I didn't second guess it. Um, I didn't change my mind the next day or even the next week or, even after even if I got into a relationship before I was leaving, I was like, nothing was changing my mind that I was going to be doing this thing. And I just stayed on that course. It was almost like it's not that I didn't have a choice. I mean, there was always a choice, but I felt like this is something that I was destined to do. Like it's just this deep knowing of that, right? But the luck factor is interesting because when I was all in on that, suddenly, like finding that the job in Japan, like just opening a newspaper and suddenly there's a job posting there, I mean, I wasn't planning on that, but part of me thought, wow, this is can't be a coincidence, so I'm just going to follow through with this. And then I started meeting other people by chance, we'll call it luck or, but I started meeting other people who had done this thing and they've been overseas and they were, like I just started experiencing all of these, chance encounters, right? And I realized like this is real, like this is all happening for a reason. Give you one more quick story though. So after I got here as well, related to luck, I got here and I came to Japan on a working holiday visa. So generally, you can only stay here for 1 year, and then you have to basically leave because you have to have a real visa to stay, right? And the other thing is also you have to have a master's to get a visa. Like it was just like at the time it was like the requirements were really strict. They're a little bit looser right now. Now I didn't have a master's, so I thought there's no way I can get a working visa. My 1 year was coming up with the company, and I really like I was determined to stay in Japan. Like I was not going back home. I didn't want to go back home to the same thing. I was done with all that, and I just wanted to continue with this, adventure, right? So again, I made a decision like no matter what it takes, I'm going to find a way to stay here because now I had a whole bunch of new friends, new environment, doing work I love to do. And probably about 2 weeks before my visa would have expired, my working holiday visa, by chance, I met a lady one day just by talking in a coffee shop. This older lady reached over, like she leaned over, and we started a conversation. And it turns out she had a school in town and she was looking to hire a new teacher. And so we got talking, and I said to her, well, I don't have the requirements for a working visa. And she said, oh, don't worry about that. My brother-in-law works in immigration. I'm like, okay, another lucky thing, right? So we get on immigration, fill out the forms, and next thing I know, and when you get a visa for the first time, you have to leave the country and come back. No big deal. So I left, went back to Canada, came back for a week. But, again, I got lucky, found another great job, and turns out she was like one of the wealthiest women in town who just happened to have a school, who just happened to be looking for a teacher, whose brother in law just happened to work at immigration, who got me a visa where normally it would have been impossible to get one. Right. And I just always had these opportunities were just always popping up because I feel like I just wanted it so bad. I was willing to do anything to get it, but there was something else. People can call it. It's. I was extremely optimistic, of course, but there was something in the universe that was definitely working for me. Not to be all woo woo, but I definitely like. Maybe I didn't believe in it at one point, but after you've gone through and you've experienced it a few times, you realize like, when you really want something badly enough, you'll start to like the luck starts to happen for you. But you made a good point though. You're right. Like you do have to want it. Like I was reading a book called, I think it was like the Third Door, and the author had an interesting story in the book where he talked about the lucky bus. I think it was something like, the lucky bus comes around all the time, right? But if you don't have a ticket to get on board, you can't ride the lucky bus. So you have to be ready for it when it comes around, so you can take advantage of that. So,
Yeah, and that's why I believe in the phrase preparation
mm,
meeting opportunity is luck, because if you aren't preparing for uh, a, a a fortune, a good fortune, then I don't think you're going to get lucky. Like I think
mhm,
lazy people who don't work hard don't get lucky.
mhm,
They might get lucky every once in a while, but if they aren't like working towards something, I don't think that they get as lucky as people who work hard. You might see somebody just having like good fortune or whatever. Like, man, that was lucky. You lucked out on that. But it's like, did I really, or did I prepare for the situation? And then an opportunity arose and I just capitalized on that opportunity, which
mhm,
might look like luck to some people, but it's really just preparation. I think about it all the time with athletes. If you
mhm,
watch a basketball game, and we got March Madness right now, and a kid hits a buzzer beater at the last second, half court shot, like, oh man, that was lucky. But like, how many shots has that kid taken in his entire life? You
mhm,
don't think he
mhm,
prepared for that moment? Not that exact shot, but he
mhm,
knows how to shoot a basketball. So he
mhm,
probably did a lot of preparation, and
mhm,
the opportunity arose to hit a last second buzzer beater, and he capitalized on the opportunity. That's
mhm,
just how I look at it, because a lot of people, they think it's that, woo woo type luck, but at the end of the day, it's like, no, people just prepare for those
mhm,
situations, and you see luck because you haven't seen the process. You didn't see what
mhm,
that person went through. You
mhm.
don't know how hard they've worked day and night, so it looks like luck to you.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. It's like the overnight success that people see all the time, like, oh wow, he got really lucky with that, but he'd been working at it for 20 years, no matter what that is. So yeah, I've been called lucky a few times and I always agree. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I am lucky. But um, it's and I agree with totally with what you say is like, there's lazy luck where you might get a lucky break, but if you're too afraid to take it, or maybe you do take it and you end up losing it because you don't appreciate it. You don't have gratitude for that lucky chance or opportunity. It'll just pass you by, or slip through your fingers. And so yeah, it's a combination of, I think, focusing in on what you really want and then just trusting that something is going to make it happen. I mean, that was just my experience anyway. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's can look at like you look at sports and you see with someone who got a lucky shot, but you know, they were probably, they've spent the last like 5 years shooting thousands and thousands of hoops, to get that one lucky break. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I think that if people saw more of other people's process, which is something that I harp on social media, like a lot of times, a lot of people like to post their wins, quote unquote,
Mm,
just success that they're having. But I am a huge proponent, which I'm starting to do this myself, of starting to post things online of like my process of like
mm,
the things that suck. Like I like to know what is this person doing every single day that I don't get to see? Like, what
mm,
are you doing? So, like, right before this podcast, I just posted my process of how I do my podcast, like how I
mhm,
post my podcast and what it ends up looking like. And it's not sexy. Like it's so boring and so monotonous, but it has to be done. And
mhm,
I could just pay somebody to do it, but it's really easy. It doesn't take up too much of my time, just enough of my time to be annoying, but it's just something that just has to be done and it's easy to do. So I just do it. And I show that so that people be like, oh, like this dude puts in work. Like he
mhm,
actually meticulously knows what he wants and then does it. And I think it's important for more people to see that, especially from like big name people like famous actors or people who are doing like super hard work that takes long hours, because like a movie is like it could take years to finish a movie. So
mhm,
I would love if they would come out with like more documentaries of like making a movie, because a
mhm,
lot of people we like they literally take it might take a year to shoot a movie, and the movie lasts what, an hour and a half, 2 hours. So they just summed up a year in like an hour and a half or 2 hours. So I think it's important that we know that process so we can see the work that people put in. Even like the video editor or the audio editor, they
mhm,
just put in tons of hours of editing stuff. And it could be like one sound that they just really liked the sound effect, but it might have took them 2 hours just to get
mhm,
that one sound. So yeah, I think creating your own luck is a thing, and I think you do that by working hard and preparing, and it showed with your situation. But I do want to get into like you being a writer and everything. I'm very
mhm,
intrigued on how being in Japan has
mhm,
influenced you as a writer, because the different culture is insane. Like I think
mhm,
Japan is a very and depending on where you're at, like a lot of
mhm,
people may know of Tokyo, but
mhm.
there's just so many different areas of Japan that are culturally different. So first of all, what city are you in, and also how has that differed from the many places that you've been there?
Yeah, great question. So I'm in a smaller city called Okayama City. It's just outside of Osaka or Kobe. Smaller city is, and there's like a million people. That's still small to Japan standards. But yeah, and I've lived here for the entire time I've been here because again, I've just always had really good luck with getting jobs. My family's here now and everything. So, but yeah, the culture, like some people really struggle with it. I've known a lot of people from overseas, from the UK or Australia, US, Canada, who came here, and a lot of people struggle with it. They hated it. They couldn't adapt to the culture. I never really had those issues. I was just very adaptable. As soon as my boots were on the ground, I was learning the language right away. Which by the way is a huge opportunity for me. Like it opened a lot of doors for both business and relationships, right? So like learning a language right away, realizing that I'm not in Kansas anymore. This is in Canada. They do things differently than we do in Canada, the US, right? So, a lot of people were like, well, they should do it this way because this is how we do it back in, Texas. I don't know, but it's like, well, we're not in Texas. This is not how they do it. So we have to either adapt or go home, and I didn't want to go home. So I adapted to, I didn't have to change everything, but I mean, there's certain like cultural rules that, if you don't follow them, you just don't make that many friends, right? And I wanted to make a lot of friends because I wanted to fit in, adapt, and just see how far I could really go with this thing, you know. And but yeah, it is certainly. I mean, I think after you've been in a culture for a while, you start to get a little bit desensitized to it because now the things that surprise a lot of people don't actually surprise me because I see them every day, right? But I'll tell you a quick story though. Went to Kyoto a few weeks ago, and so yeah, everybody knows like a lot of people come here. They go to Tokyo, maybe Osaka, and most people go to Kyoto. But Kyoto is just an amazing city with so much culture. So, um, I went there a few weeks ago, and we're in this taxi cab, and he's driving down all these back alleys, and it's almost like you feel like you're in old Japan, and there's like Maiko and Geisha. They're going to work and stuff like that, and it's just a very surreal experience, right? And anyway, we ended up going to this Buddhist temple. And I do a lot of meditation. We went there, we met these Buddhist monks, and this temple is one of the oldest temples in Kyoto. And so after the 1 hour of meditation that they put us through, after that, I was talking to the Buddhist monk, and he's asking, what I do and stuff like that. We got into like, writing books, and I'm a published author in Japan too. So and gave him a copy of the book. He's like, "Oh, that's interesting." He goes, "I'd like to show you something." And so he takes us around the back of the temple and takes us into this like the forest in the back of the temple where it didn't look like a lot of people had been. So me and my partner were just kind of like, "Oh, this is kind of weird." And he's like, "Yeah, we usually don't show this to anybody, but you're a special guest, so we'll show you this place we want to, you're gonna love it, trust us." So he takes us back to um, kind of felt like the back of a jungle actually, but we get back there and there's like this old tea house, right? That looks like it was, hadn't been, nobody had been inside it for years. And he shows it to us. He goes, "This is the tea house," he says, "where back like 500 years ago, this is where the samurai used to come here to this place. They would go inside this little tea house. And this is like a little cottage, like, and they had a door that was like about 3 feet high, right? So you have to actually crawl through it. And he goes, they would actually lay their swords here and they would crawl inside. And the samurai before war would drink this tea, they drink the traditional green tea before they went to battle because they knew they were probably going to die. Right. So this is really interesting because like some of the, most famous like samurai warlords would bring their armies here and they would come to this one little place. So to me, that's kind of like that influences in a sense that influences my writing because I started getting ideas for like, wow, what if, and that's always like, like, yeah, I write a lot of like, nonfiction, self-help, personal development material, but I'm also a fiction author. So my mind starts spinning when I start having these experiences, but the fact that I was shown, like, again, maybe it was just lucky, but, we start talking to this guy and he shows us this place that most, like, we'll say like most foreigners would never see. And he's like, yeah, this is like really special place to us. So yeah, this is kind of like a very cool experience, but I've had a lot of those, where, you know, um, someone just wanted to show me something that meant something to them because it had like a lot of cultural significance. But to me, is like, how many people get to see this on a, and this was like just going back to living the dream, experiencing, I always wanted to experience life to its fullest, for example. And just like those kinds of things is kind of neat because I just felt like I just stepped back, 500 years through some kind of a time portal, So anyway, that's just one story, but a lot of those things do happen though, and being in a place like this, you just never know what you're going to find because you go through your day to day and, you work and everything, but every now and then, just when you think everything's kind of like you've seen everything, something happens to kind of give you like a new sense of energy, it brings something different into your life. So yeah.
That's really cool, and that's exactly what I was thinking as
Mm,
far as,
yeah.
like, situations in your, um, I guess, experiences
Mm,
from Japan, because that's exactly what I would want to happen as a writer
mm,
or somebody who is creating any kind of art, like even if you were a painter or a drawer or something like that, you would now have those vivid images instead of something that you have just seen on a TV or YouTube or something like that.
mhm,
You had an actual image of a cottage and yeah, like when you said cottage, I was thinking of like Lord of the Rings, like Hobbit style,
mhm,
and that's it's cool that we have that kind of stuff from a movie, but to physically be there and to have that experience, I think is irreplaceable. And
Mhm.
it created it like unlocked a new vision in your brain. And I think that is extremely special.
Mhm.
Um, so along with stuff like that, what have you done in your writing that has been like bilingual, I guess, because um I'm assuming that you've learned a good bit of Japanese. Are you fluent now
Mhm.
or
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty fluent. I think again, like I studied Japanese for a long time, but and again, there's a difference between researching something or studying it and then experiencing it. So a lot of my learning really came from putting myself in situations similar to going to Kyoto and, discovering these temples and things like that. You have to really go out there and discover these things. Sure, you can see them on TV, like you said, and whatnot, but for me, like when it comes to the language, I've been to the hospital many times where I've had to explain my condition in Japanese. And the first time I went there, I didn't like, nobody spoke English. So it's like, how do I explain that I have this pain in my, and so what I would do is like, I would study about that before I went to the hospital, how to explain this. And so I would kind of like rehearsing it. And then I go to the hospital and try it once. And then you go again and again and again. You get better at it every time. So by the 10th time I went to the hospital, I was pretty good. I was able to sit down with the doctor and describe like anything that was whatever it is, whatever ailment that I had, we could discuss it. And that's just one situation. The other situation, a few years ago when, we set up our publishing company, suddenly I had to do my own taxes, like once I left the corporation and I started pursuing writing and coaching and entrepreneurship full time. I now had to deal with the tax department. That was a whole other thing where, it's one thing to just study the vocabulary for going there, but it's actually another thing to actually go there, talk to a tax person. Again, it's all in Japanese, like nobody, it depends where you're living. Maybe in Tokyo, maybe you can get people to, explain these things in English, but which ideally for taxes would be probably a good situation to understand everything. But I actually ended up having dozens of conversations in Japanese. And every time I went there and we had this conversation about this taxing, I learned something new. I picked up something more. So you just keep adding to it, it just adds more momentum and you just become more skillful at that. So a lot of the things that I learned were just all from experiences, and they're scary. I mean, that's the thing is like you're putting yourself in a scary situation. It's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know how to express it, but I have no choice because there's nobody else around here to hold my hand. So, I'm going to go and do this thing. And I think that you grow from that. You just grow from putting yourself in a situation that's really scary. And as Susan Jeffers said, you feel the fear and do it anyway. So I've always been a big advocate of that. Just do it scared, right? So yeah, but yeah.
all that was is exactly the type of fears that I have of going to Japan and because I really want to go. Me and my wife are actually thinking about coming over there next year. I have a friend that wanted to go this year, but I was like, dude, I can't do it this year, but maybe next year. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like I've been learning Japanese with like Duolingo and
Mm-hmm.
um some other things like I bought like books and stuff to learn Japanese, but yeah, like if you go to the hospital, good luck explaining, what's wrong and just going to the food market trying to find certain foods and
Mm-hmm.
um that I think that's something that can help because, you have a picture, right? You've got
Mm-hmm.
something
Mm-hmm.
and I guess that's what you would have had to do if you were at the hospital. It's like, give me a picture. Let me see a human body, and I can point at stuff. So organs or something like that. So yeah, that's a very interesting problem to have in a different country. Also, I wanted to kind of pick your brain on your just experience. Did you grow up in Canada or no? Are you from there?
I, I did, yeah. So I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. and lived in a small little town for a very long time. And after I finished college, there weren't that many jobs around. So again, I made one of those definitive decisions where I had a friend of mine who was living in Vancouver. And this is back in like 92. This is way back, a little while ago. So my friend said, why don't you come to Vancouver? Lots of jobs here. And at the time I was like, I don't even think I'd been on an airplane at the time, right? And I just decided again, when he said that, something in me just went, that's a great idea. And I made a decision to leave my hometown, leave my parent, living at home, nice little situation. Mom and dad could have taken care of me for a little while longer, right? Working, part time at the local pub, and yeah, just finished college, but I was in no hurry to, get a job. Well, I was actually, but I mean, it's like as long as I was working at the bar, I had money coming in, didn't matter. But I didn't want that. I wanted more than that, right? Something in me was just like, yearning to like, experience something different. So anyway, um, made the decision to move out west. 6 months later, I was on a plane. Again, it was almost like when I decided to go to Japan and I made that decision, there was no backing away. There was like the pivotal point was like when I made that decision, and there was no going back on it. At the time too, I mean, I was in a relationship, I was in love, I was gonna do, settle down and everything, but I was like, no, I've got to do this thing no matter what the cost. And so I did. And anyway, ended up moving out there out west. It was really interesting too, because it's probably very similar to the US maybe, but I mean, the East Coast and the West Coast was so different. It was like a new country. Like it was just like
Hmm.
the way that they did things. They even talked differently, like on the East Coast, the Atlantic East Coast, we tend to we have a very strong accent. And when I moved out there, things were like people just talked differently, did things differently. The weather was nicer and didn't have a lot of snow. I lived on Vancouver Island in Victoria City, and I thought it always snowed in Canada, but it didn't snow there. So, and again, it was like one of those places where I was like, this is great. Like, I'm in a new place. Like away from mom and dad, and I'm independent and I've got my own work. And I've always been independent though. Like that's the thing is like, I moved out of my home when I was 18 at the first time, I think, just to, because I just wanted to experience that. Right. So, but yeah, I just, once I moved out there and I was working as an engineer for about 5 or 6 years, again, it was never something that I really wanted to do. It's just that it was I took that career because I needed to do that to get to the next level of whatever that may have been down the road. But because I remember back when I didn't go to university right away, I worked for a year or two, and I was doing really hard work, like labor. Like I remember, in Halifax, it gets pretty cold outside, it's like -20. So I remember, my friends were going to university, and I'd be pushing a wheelbarrow through a construction site at -20, trying to making $8 an hour, right? And the thing is, when I look back at that time, is like, wow, that was really hard work. But I don't regret it because I think that was the stuff that really like you look back on these things, right? At the time, and it's like, you wish that you were not in that situation, but years later, I mean, that could be the experience that's going to define you when you start to move forward throughout the other stages of your life. Like that could have been it, like knowing, for example, like knowing that is not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, just prompted me to go to that next level, So there's a probably, I mean, having ambition is one thing, but I think you do have to be determined to want to make something out of your life as well. And I think we all have that. It's just that a lot of people kind of get lost on the trail. They start to do, I don't know, live up to the expectations of others or try to anyway, and they end up not living the life that would, they could be living, but living the life that others are expecting of them. So I just didn't want to be in that situation. And I was in that situation many times, but recognizing that I was in it and I didn't want to be in it was the key. So.
I was actually curious, mainly because I've been to Vancouver, and
Mm,
me and my wife, we went up there for about a week on vacation and loved it. Like,
mhm,
there's very few places where I'm like, I could live there. I
mhm.
could live in Vancouver for sure. Like, and so the weather actually did throw us off because we went in November and
Mhm.
thought it was going to be like how you described the East Coast. Like, thought it was going to be, 10 feet of snow and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. But didn't snow the whole time. It rained
Mhm.
like pretty much half the time we were there, maybe more than half the time. And
Mm.
I
Mm.
think it was like the highest it got was probably like mid 60s, and
Mhm.
the lowest was probably like in the 30s or so. But it felt great for for what we thought Vancouver was going to be in November. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think Vancouver is absolutely beautiful, and we ended up going to uh, we were, like, on the bay somewhere, and there was, like, a donut shop in this small area,
Mhm. Mhm.
and, we ended up like, the owner was, like, talking to us, and she was like, "Oh, man, you gotta go to Seattle." We are like, "Seattle? Like, we we came up here to be in Canada," but she's like, "Oh, Seattle's great," but it was just really cool, like, everybody there, seemed like they had a lot of pride in their shop. Like when we would talk to people who own businesses, like there was another guy we talked to, he had like a biscuit place, and
Mhm.
he actually said, I'm from Alabama, but
Mhm.
I currently live in Memphis, Tennessee. And he said, yeah, I actually took a lot of Tennessee culinary stuff and brought it here to Vancouver because I just like the food down there.
Mhm.
I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Vancouver is an amazing place.
Yeah. No, it is. I loved it. I mean, the time that I spent there was just amazing. So it was actually hard to leave. It was, but I mean, I was at the point where I was ready to leave because I experienced that for, 6 or 7 or 8 years, and I was just ready for the next thing. But you're right. Like, I mean, it's certainly a place where you could make a home there for sure. Yeah, the weather is great. Yeah, it rains a lot. They say if you move to Vancouver, just, invest in an umbrella, a good umbrella, so
Yeah. Is
yeah, yeah.
is there something that you learned about doing electrical work, when you were an engineer? Did there's something that you were like,
Mhm.
"This is something that I could venture down the path in the future, but right now it just" 'cause, I mean, you said if you found out things you didn't wanna do, but was
Mhm.
there something that you're like, "Maybe one day I might get to venture down this path, but I'm gonna put it on the back burner for now?"
Yeah, what I loved about doing that kind of work is that, and the reason I chose that when I went to college is because, well, first of all, it's probably one of the fewer courses that I was interested in, but I also liked figuring things out. Now, here's the thing: is like to get into that course or that trade to become an engineer, like you have to be good at science and math and that stuff. And thing is, I more or less I made it through high school, but I barely made it through. In fact, I graduated. Well, I was probably short of 2 credits, so I didn't actually technically graduate, although I've completed 3 years. So what I had to do when I left is, and again, this is pre-internet, so I ended up taking a bunch of correspondence courses through mail after I graduated. So while I was working in construction and trying to make a living, at night I was taking these night courses. And again, like I had to be motivated to do that because nobody else was really going, you have to do these things. I could have not done them. But the courses I took were mathematics, physics, chemistry, things that I never studied in high school because I actually couldn't get into the courses. They wouldn't let me because my marks were so low. But I was determined to learn them anyway. And for whatever reason, I didn't know. It's just that when I learned them, I felt good. It's like, because in high school, I failed mathematics twice. I couldn't get through. At the time, I realize now it was just a mindset thing where I believed I couldn't do it. And everything that around me was reinforcing the fact that I couldn't do it, including my teachers, that like, you can't do this. Turns out that I could, it's just that I had a mental block. So when I started to apply myself, I got through these courses, finished them, got into the school I wanted to, got into the course I wanted. And then when I got into the electrical field, it was a lot of hard work because you actually, like, there's a lot of things to figure out, making like blueprints of buildings. And, it's one thing to, if you're a carpenter and I don't know, nail a piece of wood to the wrong side of the wall, not a big deal. You can probably take it out. But I mean, if you hook up a couple of high voltage wires to the wrong side of a transformer, you've got a big problem. So there was always a lot of responsibility, right? But that's what we were there to do. And what I learned mostly from that job though is like I worked with a lot of different guys in that field too. And it was interesting because I would look at where like I was probably like what 23, 24 to maybe 28, 29. I was working in that industry and I looked at guys that were like 20 or 30 years ahead of me. And I didn't like what I saw. Like they were really burned out. They've been working for a long time. They didn't seem like, a lot of them seemed like they were broke. So I'm like, and that's when I started to realize like I don't really want to do this for the rest of my life. And I didn't, right? But once I realized that, I started to be able to, make that pivot towards like, okay, well, I don't want to do this, but what do I want to do? Like obviously, like I don't want to continue with this, and I ended up getting, end up becoming certified and then running jobs myself. And that, by the way, was something I did not want because that's a lot of responsibility. And now it's like I was working in an industry where I didn't really want to continue in it, but the pay was pretty good. And now they put me in charge of like 10 other guys on a site. And I had no idea what I was doing. And some of these sites were pretty like they put us into like a government warehouse and we had to wire up this one building that was it was like the CIA. I mean, it's like this secret building where they're going to use for not spy stuff, but it is like one of these rooms that we were building was actually for that. It was pretty heavy duty stuff. And I was in charge of wiring all this up. And I had no idea. I was remember I would stay home at night, late at night, just reading these blueprints and all these things. And just trying to figure this stuff out. Right. And of course, I mean, I had the owner of the company was relying on me to do this and he was giving me direction. But he also had a tendency to suddenly lose it when things didn't go well. So there was that to deal with as well, quick, just really interesting story though. Like, yeah, the owner of the company, he was known for kind of losing it when things didn't go well, and that happened like once a week. But he went into the hospital once for like a hernia. He had an operation, and this was a pretty important week because we were going to be this building that we were putting together. We were going to put flip the switch on like it was ready to go, right? So it was like either he was going to work or it wasn't, and if it didn't work there was like millions of dollars at stake. And he went into the hospital and he wasn't supposed to come out for like 2 weeks, and everybody was kind of relieved like, oh good, okay, like we can like do our jobs probably without him showing up and yelling at everybody. But 2 days after the operation his truck pulls up outside the construction site. I'm like, that can't be him. And he almost falls out of the truck, right? Holding his side. He let himself out of the hospital and he's like holding his guts in and walking towards me like, is that ready to go yet? And it's just one of those things where it's almost like a surreal moment, like you can't believe it's happening. And the I think the head site guy comes over. He goes, Sean, you've got to get back in the truck and go home, go back to the hospital. But it's like one of those things where you realize like I was put in a situation where it was a very tough situation that at the time when I look back, I'm like I never would have volunteered for it. But it was like either you take this position or we have to find somebody else who can. So it's like, all right, let's do it. And it came with a lot of like experiences like that. But again, I look back at those things and, as hard as they were, you realize like those are the things that actually, moving forward throughout life, like you condition yourself to experience hard things. And it just it the one thing that it does do though is that it improves your luck as well, because when you go through these hard things without quitting, right, that's the key, without quitting, then there's something greater for you waiting on the other side. So whenever I was going through hard jobs, hard bosses, whatever it may be, I knew that if I get through it there's going to be something better on the other side of that, and that's what always kept me going. So
That's crazy.
yeah. Oh, it was. Yeah, that was just one of many, but yeah, it's interesting times for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you, I guess, experience as far as different kind of career fields? You kind of explained a few, but any other things that you've kind of dabbled in that you want to go down, or just hobbies or anything like that?
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of the bigger transitions I had to make as well was so when I moved here, I was teaching business English, working in corporate for about 20 years. And the writing that actually started way back, I think like 12 or 15 years ago. I sat down and just again made a decision that I was going to write a book, like it had to be like I'd put it off long enough. It had to be done. It was one of the things on my, my big goals list. And so I sat down and I started working on it. Now, again, I had no plan in mind. I just had an idea for a self-help book that I was going to write, and that was it. And I finished the book within, I think it took me like a few years. I ended up writing so much. I had like 3 books, right? And so at the time when I finished putting the books together, Amazon had just launched their self-publishing platform, which I was actually already pitching the book to some publishers, and a couple of them seemed interested, right? So I thought, okay, this is good. Let's see where this goes. But when the self-publishing thing came around, it's just like I just wanted to get this done, right? So I did. But the thing is like I was still working in corporate, and I would be doing that for, that was a full-time job. So like, and then I had a family at the time as well. So we're talking like family, full-time job, writing, where does that fit in, right? And that's one of the things that I hear a lot from people who, because I work with a lot of people who I coach people on how to, write books, market their books and everything. And that's probably one of the most common things I hear is, I don't have time for this. And I get it. Like, there's never time for it, but I had to make the time. I remember like waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning. I'd work until about 6 a.m. and my kids would get up around 6:37, get them ready for, they're older now, but at the time they were just going to kindergarten, maybe get them ready for kindergarten, pick them up afterwards. And so I always just had to make the time for the writing because I knew that, again, looking ahead, like this was going to be the new thing. I didn't know why, didn't know how. I just believed in, the luck bus was going to come around. And if I didn't have my ticket ready, I wasn't getting on the bus. Right. So that was it. Started publishing my books. They weren't, I mean, they were okay. They weren't great. They probably had cheesy covers. They've been since been changed and everything's been rebranded since then. But the thing is, like, what holds a lot of people back is that they get caught up in perfection. They think I have to produce this perfect manuscript and this perfect cover and, put it out there. But I mean, you just got to have some, I guess as Seth Godin said, you got to publish. Like you've got to just push it out there, Um, and that's what I did. So the transition though was, I was still working in corporate, and then I put out 3 or 4 books. And by the time I hit book 4, things started picking up. I actually started making money. I went from making like a few dollars to, I think, at one point, I was making more from that than from my actual full-time job. And then I realized like, and I honestly, I didn't believe it. I was like, no, this can't be right. I mean, they must have someone in Amazon made a miscalculation, like they're sending me too much money, but they were actually sending me some pretty good paychecks, right? It wasn't like mind blowing. I mean, I wasn't getting rich off it, but it made me start to rethink like maybe I don't need to stay in this. I've been teaching for a long time and working in corporate, and I'm not a desk jockey. I don't like staying at desk for a long time. So I was like, I think I might actually consider leaving this. And one day I just did because the business had gotten to a point where like I could probably survive by doing this. And so I just pulled the trigger, Don't know if I was ready. Like at the time, it felt like I was ready. And this was pre-COVID, probably back in 2019 when I left my full-time job, but I'd had about a dozen books out by then. And so I just made the leap, But it was like one of those transitions where it's like, maybe I could have done both of those things, but I was putting in like 15, 16 hours a day writing and working full time and, and taking care of family and other things like that. And I realized at the end of the day, I just wanted to create content that's helping people to create greater lives for themselves. And if I could do just that, then maybe I don't need to do the rest of the other stuff. So I did. I left my other job. It was really hard, and as you know, COVID hit us all pretty hard. Um, and but I just dug in, and there's a story or two in between there, like the whole COVID thing. What I discovered though, here was something interesting is like a lot of people think that they want to be their own boss, and I know it sounds sexy, but what I discovered is that I was not ready. Like I thought I was just going to stay at home, write books, and like working from home and being my own boss. And I realized like I'm not. I'm actually well. I'm a much better CEO of my company now. But back then, when I was my own boss, I really struggled with self control. Like there was a lot of things that I just wasn't prepared for. Doing my own taxes, organization, having a schedule, keeping myself on track, all these things that they usually take care of when you're working in a company, they do these things for you. And now suddenly I had to manage myself, and managing oneself. I can't speak for anybody else, but that's the hardest thing to do, was really just to, keep myself on track. It still is some days, but I learned more from that than from anything else, I think, like making that transition. It took a few years, really. And there were times when I thought, I'm done with this. I'm going to go back to my job. I actually went back to the company, tried to get my job back during COVID, and they're like, we're actually probably shutting down because COVID's killed the business. And I realized, wow, so if I hadn't left, I'd be out of a job anyway. Interesting. Okay, you know. Anyway, time went on. The luck bus came around again, and I had a really good ticket at this time. I cashed it in, and I just kept going forward. I just dug in. We built the publishing business a couple of years ago, where we technically we set up the business, the LLC and everything. And I realized, I guess one of those things was like, it was either do it or don't do it, right? And I think it was just something like, if you really want something badly enough, you'll find a way to make it work, right? And if you don't want something, then give it up and go after what is the one thing that you really do want more than anything. uh, because either way, you're going to pay for it. If you can suffer now or suffer later. That's just the way I see things. Is like, I can just continue with my full-time job, getting a paycheck. Wasn't, got to the point where I wasn't happy with it, but I could have just continued on that path. But I did have this other opportunity. So, but again, it's an opportunity that I had to create, right? It just didn't just materialize. So, anyway, I don't know if there were some takeaways there, but I think the main takeaway is like, there are no guarantees in life. Like, there's no guarantees, but the only guarantee is that if you don't figure out what you want, and you just do the things that everybody else wants you to do, well, I mean, you'll just have to accept like where that's going to end up. Where you're going to end up with that, right? So, one last thing that I love is like, I think it's I can't remember who wrote it. It was a famous nurse, but it was like the five regrets. And like, I think she did a study of the, older people who had like these regrets. And number one regret that they had was that they did not live a life that was true to themselves. Like, I just always think about that, right? It's like, that's the one thing, is just like, live a life that's true to yourself. And I mean, if you do that, not only are you going to be happier, you're going to make everyone else around you happier.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah.
That is good words to live by, and a good way to end this. If you could, I guess, go ahead and give everybody some ways that they can reach out to you, or find your works online, and any way they can contact you.
Sure, yeah. So we have two websites. One is at scottallanpublishing.com. That's more for our publishing partners. You can find out everything about the books on there. And then scottallanbooks.com is our Shopify store. Still under construction. We're almost finished, but that's where we're going to have merchandise on there, journals and everything. So, but yeah, you can check that out. And of course, there's always Amazon. You can plug in Scott Allan Books or Scott Allan Author on there. And I'm sure a Google search would probably lead you to the same paths. So yeah, but I'm here to help people to, again, just like take charge of their lives, supercharge their success. It's there if you want it, right? And I'm really glad that we had this conversation today, especially the part about luck. I'm going to write a book on that, because it's such an amazing topic. Because I think there's a lot to it, where it's like, you've got to create your own luck, but you've got to be ready for it too. You've got to build that opportunity. So,
Yeah, if you can trademark the luck bus. I don't know if that was something that you grabbed from somebody else or what, but like, that's the luck bus is something that, yeah, like, that's a very good metaphor for life in general. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your stories, and everything with the experiences from being in Canada to traveling to Japan, and even the samurai story that was pretty cool. So yeah, all that stuff is great for people to know, and understand about even that last part of what you're saying, just being the true you, and experiencing life to the fullest. Because sometimes we kind of get lost in that, and we kind of forget to do that. I know we everybody says they're too busy for this, too busy for that, but when are you not? It's like when are you going to make time? You know,
Mhm, mhm.
everybody says like, oh well, one day. Well, when is one day? Just make that today.
Yeah,
So I think that's very important. But again, thank you for coming on and sharing everything.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.